Hello and welcome to episode 36 of Something Inventive. We'll be talking about WordPress and meetups, and we've got a guest, Elliot Richmond, who I will introduce in just one moment. This episode's sponsor is our upcoming events. We've got a lot of upcoming events throughout the year, and I just want to run through a few of them with you because there's some good stuff there and they're all free. But first, the guy joining me today is Elliot, and I met Elliot at a WordPress meetup. I wanted to reach out a little bit more and learn more about WordPress and get to meet some of the people behind it who work in it every day, and Elliot is one of those. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, Elliot, and then how you got started with the meetups.
My name's Elliot Richmond. I'm a web developer. But I specialize in WordPress web development. I'm the host of the WordPress meetup in Cheltenham, or one of the hosts rather. I also run a company called Square One Software. I'm a director. I'm one of two directors, actually. I'm life partner of the other director, so we kind of work and live together, which has its ups and downs, but it works for us. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for us. And we have two boys who are football mad. We're Arsenal fans. Started using WordPress maybe 15 years ago, coming from a design background. So I worked in creative agencies before embarking into web development around about like the late 90s or around about that time.
The golden days of web development.
Yeah, it's tables and before CSS and floats, things like that. That was good fun. Really, the backstory to that, before I even got into creative work, I had an interest in code when I was at school. I actually did an Open University home course that taught me a lot of kind of disciplines and principles about code, like loops and functions and variables and all that kind of all that sort of complicated stuff. I didn't finish it. I didn't qualify, but I did study for a good few years, and then obviously fell into creative, where I then kind of naturally moved on to kind of web development in the late 90s, and then did a full circle and came back to web development. And I touched on various open source projects. What happened was I realized that there were, you could build static pages, and I was building websites for myself. I was in a band at the time, so I was doing free website for the band.
I didn't know you were in a band, Elliot.
I played bass in my very first, then moved into electronic music and things like that with one of the ex-members of the band that I was in at that time. I joined another band playing bass, and it kind of like fizzled out. Family came along and I didn't have time to do stuff. But I've got several guitars hanging up around the house. And
I can see the keyboard in the back there as well.
Yeah, that is gathering dust at the moment. It doesn't really get used. Yeah, I tinker with it every now and again. But I pick up the guitars and annoy the family really more than anything at the weekends. So when I've got time. So building static pages for my own projects and things like that made me realize that websites needed to be more dynamic, and it kind of then I started breaking into open source projects and then delving into the complexities of how they work. So like Drupal, Joomla, and the very, very early stages of WordPress before it became what it is today. In fact, I broke into I think it's Evolution B2 now, or it was B2 originally, before it was forked, and then to .NET, and used a few .NET Nuke, I think was the package.
Yeah, I know that one, yeah.
Yeah, so I worked for a couple of consultants that worked for WSI, which is kind of a global...
Yeah, no, they're all over the place, a lot of consultants.
Yeah, consultants buy into franchise. They're more consultants. They don't really necessarily know much about web development, HTML. They kind of know basics, doing a lot of freelance work for people like that. And then, just basically did a full circle and came back to WordPress around about version 2 point something or other, and then kind of stuck with it really. Involved in the community, not involved with the community as such, but like going to the gym and listening to lots of WordPress podcasts, watching stuff on the internet, because there was lots of tutorials, reading blogs. In the early days, it became quite apparent that there was a growing community of giving people, especially over in the States. And there was these things called meetups popping up, and then WordCamps. And then they started popping up in the UK. Yeah, that's kind of the backstory, really. And then, moving forward, jumping a few years, WordPress meetup in Cheltenham was born.
Yeah, so let me share my screen and we'll just get that website up. Yeah, why was it born? Why did you decide to dive into this?
Well, it was because the community gives so much. I thought over the years I acknowledged myself. I thought I got to the stage where I was kind of sharing my information with friends and other developers and helping them out and connecting with people, and then starting like Facebook groups up and things like that. It was kind of the reason for doing it was my way to give back in the only way that I really could. Building something or actually contributing to Core, because I've got a day job and I work for myself. Just finding time to do things for myself or my clients was more absorbing than actually giving back to the community. So went to a WordCamp at London round about 2015, 14, maybe. But I met a guy called Ben Hutchins, he's a podcaster as well, runs another podcast called Relative Paths.
He's got a good name.
Along with a guy called Mark Phoenix, who basically co-hosts. I don't know how we got talking, whether it was we were conversing on Twitter or something like that, and we ended up meeting at WordCamp. London, and then I mentioned that I used to go to the Bristol meetup. It was very early days, the Birmingham one, and which is kind of like, I think they've just restarted the Birmingham one, which is kind of, because where I'm based in Cheltenham, it was like an hour too far. Not too far, it was an hour either direction. So I suggested to Ben, I said it would be nice to have something on our doorstep, and I think that was read as, right, okay, that's you're going to start something up in Cheltenham. And Teresa Vance was there as well, who's the other co-host who helps me sort of get this thing off the ground. He introduced us, we got chatting, we hooked up on Twitter and stuff with the intention to start something up around about then, which was 2015 maybe. And it didn't really happen because, again, we got back to work, our day job started getting in the way, but we bumped into each other again at WordCamp Bristol in 2017, and then that was it. It was like, Teresa was very much like, we've got to get this thing off the ground. We said we're going to do it. It's now 2 years later or 3 years later. And he said, yeah, okay, well, yeah, let's get on with it then. And then the following November 2017, that year, we had our first WordPress meetup. Put it out. I went through the kind of WordCamp Central process where you get an orientation, you get various information on how to run a meetup.
Oh, right, that's good. That must have helped kickstart it, really.
Yeah, I mean, once you get into that kind of system, it's like you get to a point of no return. You have to do it. So yeah, we put it up on meetup.com, and I think we got maybe about 7 or 8 people show up on the first meetup, which was fine. Everybody in the community says, that's fine. Just there's no pressure to get numbers or anything like that. Yeah. And there still isn't, to be honest. And we've grown, I think, we've got something like 250 members on the meetup page that you're looking at there.
Yeah, I've just scrolled through a lot of them, 265.
And then we get we meet every third Wednesday of the month. We get regularly about up to 20 people. Yeah, and I think, we deliver good content. We get speakers like yourself. I think you've been one of our speakers. I think when we started it, I was very conscious not to make it too developer centric. Yeah. And appreciate that there's an equal balance of users as well as developers.
Well, I remember my first event there, I think sometime last year, was with a copywriter. I don't remember her name now, but yeah, it was a copywriter. So it's been quite a mix, lot of different types of events.
Yeah, the content is quite important, and you need to be inclusive for everybody. So getting that balance is essential, really, and not make it too off-putting for some people, get an imbalance. But I'm a member of the WP UK community Slack group, and you can reach out to anybody in the community. And obviously, because I've been going to WordCamps and meetups and stuff like that, you make a lot of connections. And initially, you fear a little bit to sort of reach out to them and say, look, can you speak and things like that. But they're more than willing to, especially the more seasoned speakers, and also reaching out to our own community as well, our own members. I think it's quite important. Like, you came along, and I think it was suggested that, we reach out to people in the room. If you want to talk about something, come and talk about it. And
I know you had Jonathan Pollinger recently as well. And I know you've known him for a little while.
Next week, actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
It's the event I had up? Oh, I can make that. I thought I was going to miss that.
Yeah, he's coming next week. So again, and I had this conversation with somebody a couple of meetups ago, and they kind of attended because the speaker was there, but the speaker was speaking about something that was not really WordPress.
Yeah.
So, and I think it was important to try and explain to people that WordPress is the sum of many parts. When you go to a conference, you're not necessarily going to see a talk specifically about WordPress. It might be about UX, or it might be about accessibility. But all of those elements are the sum that make up WordPress, So you might be a React developer and not go to WordPress meetup because it's not about React, but actually React is part of WordPress with Gutenberg and stuff. Just bringing in talks like that is beneficial to anybody, even if they're a designer breaking into development and they want to know a little bit more. It's just like a nice little taster to whet their appetite even more, let's say.
Yeah, and I think just because a talk may not be about WordPress, it is relevant to any other language or platform that you're using. Certainly if it's about content, if it's about maybe accessibility. I know there was a great talk on that, actually. And anything certainly around the programming and web development sphere, WordPress is just a way you can do that. And I know a lot of the people who come to it, that's not necessarily solely what they develop in. That's just one aspect of what they use. It's just a common factor, a good way to meet with like-minded people, really.
Yeah, like-minded people. I've certainly made some new friends. I made new friends going to, other meetups and stuff, or not day-to-day friends, but connections you can make that, if you go to a WordCamp, you're going to bump into them and say hi, and you can sit and have a coffee with them. But definitely more local. I mean, I would consider us friends if we bumped into each other. Exactly.
I know we have good chats afterwards, because often they finish early and it's all based in the pub. So we nip downstairs for a quick half or something. But yeah, and I found that very good. It's really nice to meet diverse people through this one connection. What I haven't done yet is gone to any other WordPress meetups yet. I'm intending to go down to a few in Bristol and to this WordCamp that's coming up soon.
Yeah, so if you're wondering, if anybody's watching this and wondering what a WordCamp is, basically a meetup is a small condensed version where you get speakers that talk about things related to WordPress. If you go to WordCamp, it's a conference, so you get the whole day, different tracks. You may get a development track, you may get a content track or users track, or a community track. And there's also, it tends to be bolted onto that what's known as a contributors day. Because WordPress is open source and it's run by volunteers, they need people to help out with all sorts of things like documentation, user experience, bug testing, theme testing, everything like that. In fact, you may think that it's probably overwhelming. You're not, you may not be good enough to be able to help. If you go to a contributors day, you will almost certainly be used and abused to do something. Everyone's grateful for it because, without the help of volunteers, WordPress wouldn't be what it is today.
And you went to one recently. Was it WordCamp London?
Yeah, WordCamp London. I think the theme of it was content. I went to one content talk, but again, there's lots of different things that you can go and see. So when they have their sessions and their tracks, you get there on the day with the greatest intentions of going to do X, Y, Z. You go for a coffee, you bump into somebody and you kind of go, I'm going to see this. And it never works the way you plan it. Yeah, I mean, this year I learned stuff about speed of your website and how to improve it for Google rankings.
Oh, right. Are there any little nuggets you can pull out from that? Because that's always something that's incredibly important, getting it fast, not just for Google, but for people.
I would say there's stuff there that I wasn't really unfamiliar with. There was a plugin actually by the lady that gave the talk. So she's got a plugin that basically checks if the speed has changed. Classic example is if you on your front page, maybe you've put a bit of content and it loaded quickly, and then a week later you added some more content, but you threw in a massive picture. All of a sudden you've gone from 1 second load to 4 second load. You get an alert to say something's changed, and those are the kind of things that slip through the net. So that's one little gem. But there was hundreds of little things that you pick up. I think probably the better talks are the lightning talks, because if you go to a half an hour talk, it's almost like, you're going there to learn about one particular thing for half an hour, and then you get questions. To absorb all of that and all the information you get is quite overwhelming. So I would make note. What I tend to do is go back like 6 months later and look at WordPress TV when they finally get released, but they are getting better. So, but when you break it down into lightning talks, I think you can, they're so condensed and small, you just get one little nugget, and that might just be a snippet of code or a WordPress function you weren't aware of. You probably can have maybe 3 talks that you might not be interested in on one session. Like at 3 o'clock, there's 3 talks, and you go, well, I know about multi-site, or I know about CSS, and I know about whatever. You go, well, I'll go for a coffee. But actually, the best information I've got is going to something that I think I know a lot about. You come away with some amazing thing that you would never expect to come away with. It might be a little framework that somebody uses, or maybe a little gem. On that basis, I always tend to go to a talk rather than skip one that I might think I might not get anything from.
Yeah, exactly. These are opportunities, and you may as well take them, because you can go for a coffee later. You can meet someone on a different day, maybe, if that's possible, or you can catch up with them online. But these are sort of they're happening at that time. So what about the cost? They're not terribly expensive from what I remember. There's the Bristol one coming up. Let's have a look. Its tickets are about £35 standard ticket.
Yeah, and it's pretty much the same for London, maybe a little bit more. You get all that information, you get fed, you get teas, coffees, biscuits.
Oh, well, I'm there.
It's amazing. It's really good value for money. I think it gets subsidised. They do that for a reason, to keep the cost down.
Well, they've got a ticket here that's called Micro Sponsor, and I think it's just saying that this is actually the true cost of an event ticket, and it's £150. I just want to come back to a few things. Before we started recording, you spoke to me about WordPress 5.2 that's just come out, and a new health check feature. Maybe you want to talk us through that?
If you've got a WordPress site installed, you get updates regularly, and it's always worth updating because you get a little more functionality that comes in, gets dropped in. I noticed this the other day. You try and aim to get everything perfect, inevitably things may slip through the net. And especially if you run kind of WordPress related business where you're managing WordPress sites for lots of clients, things can slip through the net unless you're on it 24/7 and rechecking things. So It's got this little bit of functionality. It's got a health check, which is under from the dashboard, and then tools, and then you can just run through it, and it will list things that you need to give attention to. And recently, the minimum version of WordPress, I think it's going to move up to PHP 7, and they're degrading older versions of PHP. So it's just little things like that. And on most servers, you can update your PHP version. But
that's been happening. I've been noticing that's been a quite conscious effort from a lot of hosting companies. I know we have a few old sites with Fasthost, and they've been quite aggressive at doing aggressive in a nice way, as in they're doing it quickly. But they've been sort of forcing that forward and pushing people to update, because I really think it must be impacting them from a hacking point of view. That if you've got older versions of PHP, it's going to have vulnerabilities in them because they're not supported anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest benefit as well is it's just much faster.
Yeah, if you haven't upgraded your site, you haven't looked at the hosting, do go and have a look at that. And if you're on, like, I think it's 5.6.
Yeah.
We noticed a few were on. Move it up, sort of nudge them up the levels, and you might find that at some point it might break if you got to like 7.3. I think sometimes there may be some deprecated functions in there that don't work.
Yeah.
But actually, it's worth nudging up to at least 7, if not 7.1 or further, because you do notice a speed increase.
So I've got some old legacy sites that, in the back end, they're just so cumbersome, and the quickest thing to do is just upgrade the PHP version. All of a sudden they're lightning fast. Yeah, so for things like performance checks, also it will check like plugins and things like that. I still need to dig deeper into it, but from what I saw, it was just a site that I thought was running quite smoothly. There were about 3 different elements in there that I could check, and they're pointers to just go and fix them, and was able to fix them relatively quickly. In my mind, I feel good because I know that it's been given a health check by core developers.
Yeah, so it's nice they're bringing in some of these features, because they have been available, or some aspects of it have been available via plugins, security plugins. Yeah. But I feel personally more comfortable if they're built into the core of WordPress. I think it's great to have plugins that extend WordPress and get it to do different things. But I think from a security point of view, I feel much more comfortable with just WordPress handling that, really, rather than other plugins, because I feel either they're leeching off information, they're in it for their own game, especially if they're free plugins.
No, I agree. I'm a bit of a stickler for sticking to standards. If they built something, then their standard's going to be pretty good. I mean, there's good and bad. There was something recently with the way that Jetpack was recommending its own plugins recently through search, but that happens. People make mistakes, and it's going to, the community's that big that you can't keep everybody happy all the time.
Exactly, and it's important to note that WordPress is run by, it's essentially open source, and it's run by a community. So if you want to contribute to it, you can. I mean, obviously they're not going to just accept everything, but if you have a way of you want something to happen, then you can contribute that code, or you can be part of it. And also the code is reviewed by lots of other people. So it's very difficult for those sort of things to slip through.
Yeah, in terms of security and things. So I think anything moving forward, as long as you plan it correctly, say to the client, okay, well, just be transparent. We've got this thing, we can use it if you want to. If you don't want to use it, we can use something else like Advanced Custom Fields or Visual Composer. And as long as they understand that, and they understand it may be they're bleeding edge and testing things all the time, then I think it's okay. For me personally, if it's my own site, I don't mind bunging that in and just running with it, really.
Yeah, because it's something that you can cope with, and it's going to give you experience when you come to, you do need to deal with it. It's definitely something that was needed, because everything else would be moving forward, but the editor stayed very, very similar.
I'm very interested to see how it all pans out with, moving Gutenberg into widgets and menus and building things like that. So it's kind of all going to be built with, if you're not using it now, and you come, later on down the line and you build a new site and you've got to build everything with Gutenberg, it's going to be a bigger learning curve, because I don't think, hopefully there'll be legacy sort of fallback. If you did it the old way, you need to still do it the old way.
I'm sure there will be. At some point, they're going to have to be dragged forward. It's always tough. One, because there's a cost element going around reinstalling everything and updating everything, but it's an education element, particularly when you're moving between them, because they change so much so quickly. You can see why so many people were stuck on XP at the time, because it worked. It was all locked in, and so it's very similar to this.
I was just going to say, I'm still guilty for using like old CSS techniques, and I know that there's new techniques just around. There might be bleeding edge things, but I know that I can do them in a better way. But I might still rely on, I might float this or something, where you could use modern grid and things like that, or Flexbox.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't admit this, but sometimes, very occasionally, I use the center tag. Yeah, and I don't like doing that. And that's one of the reasons we moved away from using purchased WordPress themes many, many years ago, because we'd often have to pull back a lot of what they'd put in there. Yeah. So they produce these lovely themes, fill them with temporary content and illustrative content. Looks great. But the moment you try and work with that and actually bend it to the will of the client and move in the direction it needs to be moved, you have to hack it. So you're having to put CSS in to remove things because it's difficult to go in and do it because they haven't used proper methods, or it's just quick to do it that way. And you find that often you've got these layers upon layers of hacks to remove things. It's inelegant. It works. It's fine, but it's certainly not nice. And you might get to a point where the theme is updated and those things change and then it's broken. So it's actually easier to start from scratch and write our own.
Yeah, you get one size fits all, and then they might have 5 elements or 5 components.
Yeah.
And you go to the client and say, right, I need 5 components. And they go, well, I've only got 2.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got to take all this out. Yeah. Years ago, I just built from scratch. I actually use underscores as my base theme.
Right.
I build on top of that.
Yeah, it makes much more sense. And that's often where, there's a disparity between when you're showing a client or like the theme design, you're saying, is this what you want? In our minds, this is exactly what you're going to have. In the client's mind, yeah, that looks nice. I want something like that. And when you match that with the content that you're working with them on, it doesn't work. It's fine if you want to go cheap. It's a good way to get something up and running pretty quickly. There are some great themes, and I think if you're doing something yourself, it's a great way to learn how things are done. A commercial point of view, it starts to get you into hot water down the line.
Yeah. Can of worms.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to touch on to do with WordPress?
Advanced custom fields.
Yes. Let me pull up the website for that. So explain what Advanced Custom Fields is, because it's one of these very popular plugins for WordPress.
Advanced Custom Fields tackled the whole problem of having elements in your page that were slightly different from just normal content. So again, it was kind of like, it was pre-Gutenberg, effectively. So you could build repeatable blocks of information. So you might want to put testimonials, but you want to repeat testimonials. You might want to put products and then repeat that product. It gave us the ability as developers to be more flexible about the way users in the back end could add content. But because blocks came along, you have to kind of re-educate yourself in the way that like modern JavaScript works and compiling something, and it's very JavaScript driven. So what Elliot Corden has done, taken all the best bits of Advanced Custom Fields, which is very PHP driven, and is given the ability for developers to still use PHP and still use the kind of powerful way that you can use Advanced Custom Fields to build that custom content in the back end and create blocks from them. That's the picture I see. I've looked at it briefly. If you definitely come from the PHP development world and you were worried about moving into JavaScript and being able to build Gutenberg blocks, this kind of ticks that box. It's the bridge between the two. You can build your blocks from the way you built your Advanced Custom Fields. It's the way I see it.
Right, so it's allowing the power of the fields you've created with Advanced Custom Fields, but building them into blocks that you can drag in via Gutenberg.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. I've got to dig into it because I used to use Advanced Custom Fields a few years back. I kind of stopped using it and started using a custom meta field library purely because it was just the way that the data was going into the database. It's great. Don't get me wrong, Advanced Custom Fields is brilliant and it's a good solution for anybody. But when you start getting into bigger content on single pages, that data that goes into the database, it tends to build up and get a bit cumbersome. I'd certainly be definitely going back to this purely because of my experience of trying to develop with blocks, or Gutenberg blocks with JavaScript and compiling them and stuff. I need to just get stuff built. This is definitely going to be the bridge between the two, I think, especially for PHP developers.
We've actually used it on our current site, ratherthan.inventive.com. It's running a lot of the content on there. That was before we started using Visual Composer. And it worked very well, but it's a bit sluggish when you've got a lot of fields on there, because we had basically we're using it like we made our own block editor effectively. And so actually once you've got rows and rows and rows of content on there, it's sluggish. And so they got the new version coming out is supporting Gutenberg in that way. I'm
definitely swinging back to Advanced Custom Fields because of that.
Great. I think we've got to wrap it up. We're coming to the end of our hour here, Elliot.
Yeah, brilliant.
Just before we do, there's a few links I want to pull up. We've had some good feedback on them. People I've met have said they've come across very well. So the first one I want to pull up, if I can get it up here, is a good interview called Into Dragon's Den with Sophia. So let me pull that up on screen. And so she's from Tickletops, and so she developed these cloth nappies. Now, cloth nappies aren't unique, but what she was doing is having these really fun, interesting designs on there, and that was actually the sort of direction she came at from. And it was interviewing her. She'd actually been on Dragon's Den, but it hadn't been released by the time we did the interview. So actually, I think that was coming a couple of days later. It's going to go out on BBC. So she was expecting maybe a lot of traffic to the website, which I followed up with her did happen. It helped a lot, actually, getting a lot of traffic and a lot of people looking for her product. Even though they didn't succeed, she did actually get funded on there. Didn't go ahead for various reasons. And I think that actually happens a lot with Dragon's Den. You know, things get funded on the TV program, but then they, for various reasons, due diligence, or they're just not, they don't get around to investing in it or don't sort it out. But the interview's very good. It's quite interesting to see how, you know, her journey over the past 4 years developing it. So do have a look at that. That's if you search online Into the Dragon's Den, Tickle Tops, that should come up and you can listen to that interview. And the other one is this one. Had some good feedback on this. I think it's actually helped people's gut a lot, because what a woman called Gina Gagan, and she's created this thing called Wild Fizz Kombucha. Now, kombucha is like a friendly bacteria you can ingest, and it helps your gut digestive system. And I've had a lot of people actually say, oh, I've listened to that, I've tried this kombucha stuff out, and it actually works really well. I actually make it at home as well. It's something you can brew yourself, although it gets a bit complicated, but I like doing that stuff. And I think I mentioned it to you, Elliot, about brewing this. I'll have to bring the recipe in next time I see you. It tastes quite nice. It's like quite palatable. It's a little bit sour. It's quite interesting taste. But yeah, definitely listen to that one. It's really good. She's amazing. I had a great time talking to Gina on that. So look for Wild Fizz Kombucha with Gina Gagan. Oh yeah, just a few events coming up. I've got a whole series of events planned for this year. 2 coming up in Swindon and Cirencester, both on SEO tips and strategy. So if you just go to our website, ratherinventive.com, and then there's an events page on there. We've also got a regular marketing club, so that's every single month. The topic, it says, is to be decided, but it's actually about 5-star reviews, and that is on the 28th. And then we've got other workshops, Google Analytics, getting leads from LinkedIn, and the final one this year so far is email marketing essentials, and they are all free. Most of them are based in Cirencester, so if you're listening to this and you're based in the Gloucestershire area, do come along. It'd be good to meet you, and hopefully you'll get a few takeaway bits of information as well. That's it on my sort of promotions.
Well, our business model kind of changed. So we were Square One Marketing and Design. We kind of focused on building websites for small to medium sized businesses, but we primarily focus now on building software specifically for WordPress.
Right. So this is your other website here.
Yeah, it's a squareone.software. And this is we've cherry over the years. We've picked up a few clients that like to work with us, and we like to work with them. And I basically just look after their code base, but you know, we've got room to do more of that kind of stuff, and also to sell our own products, my own products, whether they are for, you know, whether they're themes or whether they are specific plugins to do certain jobs.
You were also telling me that at WordCamp London that they were talking about content and blogging, and that started you writing again, and you've sort of revamped your site for that.
Yes.
Blog site.
Yeah, started writing. Whether it's any good or not, I don't know. But I always promised myself that I would blog more when I kind of got into WordPress. And I just think because of the kind of the platform that WordPress gives you to express yourself is something that if we look back 10 years ago, that paradigm shift that happened to publish something was very difficult. Because of all the information I got from other developers and things like that, I thought, well, I should be blogging about stuff. And I actually did on Square One, but I kind of stopped for whatever reason, because it kind of got, I don't know, it gets a little bit blurred, and actually the information is coming from me and not necessarily from the business. So I think it's been about 10 years or 15 years that I promised to blog about, you know, from myself. I finally did it because WordCamp London was based on content. But I think having an opinion is just as important as listening to other people's opinions, because by giving an opinion, you invite, you know, criticism. If that can change your mind about something, I think that's a good thing.
I agree completely. It's one of the reasons we started doing this podcast. I find it difficult to write freely. So I can write, but I can't write freely. So it's hard work for me. Blogging isn't something comes naturally. But talking's easy enough. We can do this. This is my format to get my opinions out there, and having, you know, people like you on is a good way to bounce those ideas around and get that feedback. It's one of the reasons I love workshop. It's a really nice way to test something out. You know, you've got some thoughts. Well, you can try those out on people and you can see if it works. But equally, if you prefer writing like my wife does, then it's going to be that's your chosen platform. That's your way of doing that same thing.
And there are tools actually where it will record and translate that into a transcript?
On the Mac, it can do real-time translation using the built-in Siri. There's an option you've got to tick, so it'll transcribe as you're talking. Or services like Drag and Dictate can do that very well. Yeah, great. Well, I hope that continues well for you, Elliot.
It might.
I'll be nudging you every time I see you.
The last blog post, 2018 or 2019.
For everyone who's listening, you can find the show notes for this episode on our website. That's ratherinventive.com/podcast. Hopefully you found it interesting. And if you do, go and share it with someone else. Maybe grab their phone, make sure the podcast player is installed, and go and subscribe them to Something Inventive. And if they don't know about podcasts, use that as an opportunity to open up a line of dialogue and show them all of this wondrous world of joy that they can have through podcasts that are all completely free. It's amazing. You can also give us a rating on iTunes. If you've got the podcast player on Apple or Overcast, you can give a star, and there are other players as well. This all helps to spread the word of this podcast. So if you found it useful, do tell someone else. Also, we accept questions. So if you've got a business, marketing, or creativity question, you can tweet it to @ratherinventive, or you can send an email to hello@ratherinventive.com. Remember to visit our website. Go and look at the events page. Do sign up. I know we are almost fully subscribed on the Cirencester Unicorn co-working space workshop on search engine optimization, but there are a few more spaces in our Swindon one. So go and have a look at that. If we've got lots, do email me. If we're oversubscribed, email me and we'll open up more. Other than that, thank you very much, Elliot. And thank you everyone for listening.